Hi, everybody. We are thrilled to be with you for another installment of this Facebook Live question and answer session. And today, we're going to focus on marketing. And before I introduce my guest, who is just anxiously waiting next to me, with no tech issues today, imagine that. Um, I'm Meryl Stewart. I am the president and CEO of Marketing and Business Solutions. We work with organizations and for-profit businesses to help them generate revenue, tell the right story, engage their audiences, and help their businesses grow. So today, I wanted to focus on marketing specifically, and none other than the expert that I could think of that I know who could provide so much value to this is Kristy Tozer. Hello, Kristy.
Hi.
So I'll give you a little introduction and then we'll get right into some questions. But I am so thrilled to have met Kristy. I don't know, it's been about 4 years, I think. I was working on an engagement with Zoo Tampa in Tampa, Florida, and she was over all of their marketing and advertising. And I just love her. She's super smart and kind of, down to earth and super knowledgeable. So Kristy is a marketing executive. She has over 25 years experience in entertainment, tourism, sports, and events, which is phenomenal. She spent her early career at SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment, moving into different areas of marketing throughout her 20-year tenure. And she worked for Parks in Orlando and Tampa and a variety of disciplines, from promotions and to events, to loyalty and product development. So she has a really vast amount of experience. After a brief stint consulting, because everyone's got to try that once, she moved over to Zoo Tampa, where she led the marketing, communications, and sales teams, which is where I had the pleasure of working with her. And in her time there, her team was responsible for rebranding the zoo, relaunching their award-winning website, exponentially increasing annual membership, social media engagement, and even landing a TV show, Secrets of the Zoo Tampa, which I just watched while we've been in quarantine because, and it was phenomenal. And plus I knew so many people, so it just made my heart happy. From the zoo, she left for a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to promote the Department of Defense Warrior Games, which was a Paralympic-style competition for wounded warriors. And they were hosted in Tampa in June of 2019, so last year. And then she most recently led the marketing efforts for Tampa's new XFL team, the Tampa Bay Vipers, which, we were all thrilled to get ready to have those colors on. And unfortunately, the Spring Football League only made it through 5 games before COVID-19 and then closed the season and eventually bankrupted the league. So we're sad to lose that, but, thrilled that Kristy is still in the area and, looking to share her expertise. So welcome to our little Facebook Live segment, Kristy.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Is there anything I missed that you'd like to say before we jump into some questions about marketing?
Gosh, no, it's funny when you hear people talking about you, you're like, oh, did I do all that? I mean, I know I shared all that with you and I still feel like, okay. I must be a lot older than I am.
That's how I feel. Someone said the other day, they said, between Meryl and I combined, we have 50 years of nonprofit experience. And I thought,
oh my gosh.
Wow, I really have been doing that a while.
I've been around a while.
I haven't really categorized myself into, I don't feel like I belong in that category yet, but apparently I do. So anyway, so we've had these on a weekly basis. The goal is really just to share information and expertise to help businesses and organizations keep moving forward, especially when things get challenging. And so I wanted to start with asking about, what should people be thinking about, especially right now as they're adjusting their marketing strategies? What's your advice for that?
Well, of course, as a marketer, I would say don't cut it. Because a lot of times that is one of the first things to go. It's, as you're looking at your budget and, there's not nearly as much revenue coming in, either you've closed or if you're a restaurant, you've moved to takeout only. It's really easy to say, well, we can afford to spend money on advertising or what have you. But I would say, and actually I'm taking a class through USF MUMA College of Business, which is called Post-Crisis Leadership, which is amazing. And this this statement came across yesterday that I think is really telling for what we should be looking at as marketers. Um, uh, Wendy Culpepper was a speaker, and what she said
Mhm.
was, when you're thinking of marketing, you should take a scalpel to your budget, not a cleaver. And I think that's
That's smart.
really appropriate, because you look, sometimes marketing is a big portion of your budget. If it's 8 to 10% of your total, business operating expenses, it's like, oh, that's an easy way to cut, and I don't have to lay people off. But when you do that, you become absent from the story. And I think there's so much value in remaining out there carefully and cautiously and frugally. There's ways to stay in your consumer's kind of top of mind set without spending a ton of money. Of course, digital marketing is one of those
Yep.
ways. It's probably the easiest way. But digital marketing is not one size fits all either. There's a lot of different, opportunities there, and not everybody kind of thinks of all of that. So I would say, kind of first and foremost, look at what you're doing and have you capitalized on all the free or inexpensive ways to make sure you're staying top of mind, kind of first and foremost. And then from there, figure out ways that you can spend sometimes minimal amounts of money and stay relevant in the story. PR, creating content, putting that out on your own social channels without necessarily a big advertising campaign isn't,
Right.
I say an easy way to do that, easy if you have the right tools in place.
Well, but I also think that what's important about especially the digital side is that the trackability of engagement, and is your audience responding, where are they going once they've landed or seen something, you can track their movements, and it's a lot easier to determine what's working, what's not, how do we need to adjust, kind of turn on a dime a little bit than traditional means. But one thing you and I were talking about, so Kristy sent me this link, and we'll share it after the session. But it's like every commercial out there right now looks the same, because everyone's talking about the coronavirus, and I'm taking that course too, by the way. So we
Oh, you
can
are?
keep commiserating and talking about it. But one of the things she said last night, on this course through USF was, um, you don't have to say coronavirus every time
Right.
you advertise something, because we all know it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's happening to all of us and affecting us all in different ways, but we know it exists. And so, what's your kind of thought about that? About, how do you uniquely position yourself right now in light of a crisis?
Well, I think, you know, kind of first and foremost, and I know we've talked about this, it's comical almost to see every bit of advertising or content that's out there has, you know, as long as we've been open, whether that's 5 years or 50 years, everybody feels the need to kind of establish that they have been out there for a long time and that they'll take care of each other, and that, these times are unprecedented. Like you said, we all know that. So I think the kind of better solution is, what's your brand? I mean, don't worry about the fact that you've been there for 50 years and these are unprecedented times, like you said. We How are you going to make the world better? How is everybody going to um, uh, have something enjoyable, or something they need out of what you're offering? And some, I'll call them silly, even though they're really not, kind of examples of things that I've seen some people do that made sense from a content standpoint is, Disney World, they're closed. So what do they have to talk about? Well, they didn't go dark.
Right.
They more than once ran their fireworks show on Instagram and on Facebook, so that you could still feel that connection with them and their brand and what they're both most well known for. The Florida Aquarium came out with something called C-SPAN. I think it was every weekday morning, like 10 o'clock ish. They would come on and do like a 10 or 15 minute segment, live from the aquarium. And it was all kinds
Hmm.
of different stuff that they covered. Busch Gardens did point of view roller coasters. I think um, the Clearwater Marine Aquarium came out with personalized videos if you made a donation to the aquarium. So there's things that are very relevant to their business that
Well,
also create content without having to talk about the virus.
Well, and to your point, even the zoo did that with, some of their animal engagements and education. They
Yes,
still talked about what they were doing.
yes,
The Glazer Children's Museum in Tampa transitioned their whole education team into, doing all kinds of interactive child activities online. So I agree with you. I think that, the moral of the story is that you still have a unique positioning, statement or message to deliver. And one, don't let coronavirus and COVID-19 eat up some of that precious time that you have
That's
to
right.
talk to your audience, because everybody knows it's happening. But really focus on what makes you valuable and unique now so that people stay engaged. And one of the things, also that we heard last night was that, the people who stay engaged now through the crisis, through the recovery, are the ones that will remain top of mind and probably end up with a larger market share in the end, because they remained relevant and they remain engaged, versus those who aren't quite sure what to do, or they're hoping things are going to go back to whatever normal was before. It's not waiting, it's redefining yourself or re-engaging. So I think that's really important. So in that kind of vein, what are some of the tools? What are some of the best ways and tools that you would suggest that people use to connect with their audience? What should people be thinking about?
Well, definitely, digital marketing, right? That it feels like a no-brainer, especially if you're a marketer already, to know that that's an easy way to turn. But it's not necessarily as common sense as you would think. Again, and I think Wendy touched on this last night as well. Something like 50% of businesses out there haven't claimed their own Google My Business page. That's
Mhm.
100% free. It's a great way when people are looking for businesses like yours, no matter what your business is, to find you, to pop up, to have that kind of description, to have those additional details right there on the right-hand side. So that's an easy thing. Obviously, the social media that everybody thinks about is Facebook and Instagram, but what about YouTube? What about TikTok? If that's appropriate to your audience, those are things that you
Right.
can use and put content out there and make it fun and authentic and stay engaged with your core audience, right? And I would kind of on that vein still say, don't worry about finding a new audience right now. Worry about maintaining your core audience, keeping that loyalty factor in check, because they'll stay with you. Right now, half the businesses out there can't even work at full capacity. So
Right.
just take care of your most loyal customers right now, and the others will come in time.
Well, and
Um,
we talked about, that as far as retention goes. I mean, I've talked about retention, and even whether it's donors or customers, right?
mhm,
And that it's a lot of times we don't pay enough attention to it, but right now is one of those times where if you only paid attention to that, it would be huge to just retain the percentage of your market or your customer base that you can, so that you can continue
mhm,
to move forward. But engagement strategies on all levels, whether it's digital marketing or social media or e-newsletters, or if you have the ability to pick up the phone and call someone or do video conferencing, anything that just keeps connecting with people so that you stay top of mind, from an awareness perspective, and that when you talk about what it is you're doing that is relevant to them, that they want to engage because they feel like it's
right.
genuine, they feel like you care, they feel like it's something they need or would need to have, and they'll keep you in mind when they need it. So I think it's really important. I think we underestimate the focus on loyalty and retention when everything's going great, and we tend to
That's
lean on that when everything's going bad. But that kind
That's
of,
right.
it's that time right now to get really good at it, so that when things are better again, that you have that segment that has continued to grow.
Well,
So
and I think that's exactly it. Use the time if you can. And I know a lot of things are starting to reopen now, but hopefully you've taken some of this time. And if you have additional time available, take stock of what you are doing. Who do you know who your customer is?
yeah,
Really look at that and talk to them and engage with them if you can, whether that's through social media. If you have a CRM, do a brief little survey. Like, find out, what are they feeling? What are they doing? How are they moving forward? Because I think what's really interesting here is, there have been crises before, but there's never been this crisis before.
right.
So we don't know how long the quote new normal is going to take. So what do we do? Do we just wait and see?
Well,
you know,
what did they say? It takes 66 days to form a new habit, right?
66. I thought it was 21. I was
That's what
stunned.
I thought. Well, when they tell you about fitness, it's like it's supposed to be short. So I think you stick with it, and then hope that it's going to stay. But
Right.
it's 66. Okay, it's 66. I thought, wow, that's like a lot of days. But think about it. We've all been in quarantine, right?
hmm
So if there's habits that you didn't know that you now have, like, it's because you've been in quarantine for longer than 66 days.
Right.
But it is also a great time. So even thinking about what the new normal is, and since none of us know what it's going to be, I think it's going to be whatever it is that we make it, And so part
Right.
of it is that, there's external factors that are beyond our control that we're reacting to, but there's a lot of internal factors that we can all decide as business owners and employees and strategists on how we decide that we're going to move forward. And so take the 66-day challenge, and
Right.
and alter how you do business. And if you haven't, many have, and they've been
Yeah.
successful at kind of being nimble and adjusting. But if you haven't, I highly recommend you try out some new things. So my third question for you is, what are some new trends that you're seeing in how people are engaging their audience and brand online? I've seen a lot of TikTok videos, and honestly, a lot of them are scary. But anyway, what have you seen out there that's kind of
TikTok
piqued your
scares
interest?
me, period, because it really feels like it's only appropriate to some audiences, and maybe too many people are trying to use it.
Yeah,
But again, who's using TikTok? Think about that. Although it seems like in quarantine, maybe everybody was using it. Um, but again, not to sound like a broken record, but digital media. Yeah, in the class last night, again, it just happened to be about marketing, so we've got probably lots of little tokens or nuggets from that. But people are much more connected on digital channels now than ever before. Why? Because we're in quarantine. Is that going
right.
to continue? Probably for a while, because I think one of the trends that I think we are definitely going to see as we go back, and Meryl, you and I talked about this earlier today, is telework, right? We don't know what's going to happen with schools. A lot of people are probably going to need to continue to telework. And so your digital connection is still going to be there, just like it's been through this quarantine time, or through the stay-at-home orders. And digital is going to be the way to reach people. I think probably much more. I hope the outdoor companies aren't listening and going to hate me for this, but more than a billboard necessarily.
Right.
I mean, I think there's so many opportunities to be in front of people as they're sitting on their phone, much like we are right now. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest keys. And I think we will probably see some of the new trends come out of that, because much like all the commercials start to sound the same, there's agencies and businesses out there right now discussing that, going, how do we break through?
Mhm.
And so what is that going to mean? And that's where I think you'll start to see your new cool kind of marketing opportunities come from, is who's trying to figure out how to break the mold that we're in now, because all of a sudden 66 days in or
Right.
so, everything's starting to look the same.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting to watch people evolve through this. But so I've got a question, actually, two questions from our online chat that people have submitted. So one of them is, what traction channels are best to use? So when you're looking at, somebody's marketing plan, what is
Mm-hmm.
it that you kind of focus on to make sure that there's a good balance between channels? And I realize it depends on their audience, but what are some of
Mm-hmm.
your go-tos as far as, you really need to have these essentials in your plan?
Well, I touched on Google a minute ago, and of course, we talked about the fact that only half businesses take advantage of that free Google listing.
Mhm.
And Google has a lot of insight services in there that are free. You can also subscribe to some Google Insights, but just that platform alone is probably critical to have that as buttoned up as you can be. And then from there, I think it really matters. Are you a business that's talking to consumers, or are you a business that's talking to other businesses? Because that would change your channels. I mean, obviously, Facebook is huge and everyone is on it and wants to be on it. And it's kind of what everybody's go to is. And you can use it to talk to other businesses or other consumers. So it's definitely a critical point, but don't downplay or don't underestimate something like LinkedIn. If you're doing
Right.
business to business work, especially, that's really where more people are looking to find you than a Facebook or an Instagram or so on. Um, but if you're a restaurant, if you're a museum, if you're something that's, you know, Instagram worthy, make sure you're on Instagram. So it really does depend kind of what your audience is, but there's definitely some go-tos. The other is, and we didn't really touch on it earlier, but you should have an email and a CRM program. Like, you should have a way to be capturing customer content and having a conversation with your customer, no matter who they are, every day, whether it's a
Right.
business or a individual. those emails, and I know we all get hundreds of emails and most of them feel like spam, but think about the companies that you're most loyal to. Those are the emails you open,
Right.
right? And so I think it's really critical that people consider that as part of their digital marketing campaign. Um, and I think that gets overlooked a lot of times.
Yeah. No, I think that's great advice. And it does depend on, who you're trying to reach, and what you're trying to say, because many of those, formats have different ways of communication that they highlight as their primary way. So thank you for talking through that. So what is your take on virtual networking? I think I have spent, oh my gosh, so much time in the last few weeks doing virtual networking, and I have my own opinion of it, which I'll share after you talk.
Oh gosh.
But what are some important things to consider to get the most out of it? What do you think about it?
Well, I mean, it's critical, just like networking was before we went, digital or fully digital, I guess. I mean, it's still important to stay connected because as a business owner, as a consultant, as a restaurant or whatever, you still want to stay top of mind with your customers. Again, whether it's another business or whether it's an individual. So the networking part is still important this way. What I think is interesting is how many of my kind of networking groups that I'm part of have gone to Zoom meetings. Like they've
Yeah.
maintained their same meeting schedule just by Zoom. So you can at least see each other face to face, and have some conversation and maintain some dialogue. I will say some of those are more effective than others
Yeah.
because you what you do miss in that is the one-on-one conversation, which you get out of going to those meetings, right? You step aside with somebody to have a conversation, and you can't do a lot of that, but you can still engage and you can follow up. And if you're sitting in a Zoom call and you hear something interesting, send them a note on LinkedIn or whatever and say, hey, I'd like to catch up with you because I found what you said fascinating. And
Yeah.
I think there's a way to maintain it.
I
But
think
don't go
so.
overboard.
So here's my take. I think they're critical. I think they're critical because we don't have the opportunity to be with each other for coffees and breakfasts and lunches and dinners and drinks and everything else to talk about things in person. So for me especially, it's been really important to have that virtual networking. I think that the ones where you actually have the chance to network are the better ones,
Yes.
but there are ones where it's like a whole bunch of people and they're all together and there's one person that's talking and people don't really get the chance to meet each other. I mean, I might look up people's faces that I see on a Zoom call and go on LinkedIn and start, social stalking them to figure out who they are and why it is I need to be connected to them. So I found myself doing more personal research in the past, few weeks just to learn more about people that way. And I've made some great connections on LinkedIn through networking groups, people that I would have probably never been connected with.
Mhm.
And we're actually having conversations about how do we help support each other or what can we help each other with. So that's been good. But I do think that, for anyone who is hosting virtual networking events, please, 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 have time for people to actually converse, and
Yeah.
or do breakout groups. I know Zoom does that where you can break out into groups and have
Mhm.
discussion. And still having the topics of conversation that people can discuss is kind of that icebreaker to get to know each other. But I do really think there is incredible value in it if it's done well. I think some of them now, from a content delivery standpoint, for especially for like membership meetings and things like that, I think it's been phenomenal. I mean, in fact, I found myself more likely to attend something virtually, and this would be with or without a pandemic, to attend virtually just because if I'm going back and forth between things and I can't get there physically, I would love to
Physically,
have the
right.
option to log in virtually. So I really do hope that, in the long run, that part stays and groups and chapters and members and figure out how to integrate the kind of online live broadcast, integration of their meetings, because I think it's critical just to keep the audience engaged in different ways. But yeah, it's been interesting. But I will
Yeah.
say this: I have never had so many people quickly respond to networking, especially through LinkedIn, than I have
Mhm.
now. And it's
I would
been
agree.
pretty awesome. I mean, I know that, the number and the amount of time that people have been online, has like grown exponentially in the last 8 weeks or so. But it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool to use some of the tools that have been there and maybe they've worked in the past, but right now, at least for me, they're critical to
Yeah.
business development because I can't just walk into someone's office and have a conversation. So
I would definitely agree with that. And I've seen a lot of people doing, similar to things like this. I've seen a lot of smaller businesses or consultants offering, a 60-minute free consultation, if
right,
you will, just to kind of stay engaged. And they're, literally out there going, I'm not trying to sell you anything. Let's just talk because I want to be able to grow my network right now. We can't go to Chamber of Commerce luncheons. We can't, we can't show up at the West Shore Lions. There's
right.
limited ways for us to connect on that one-on-one. And so I do think those opportunities to have conversations are super critical right now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So another question that came in through our feed from Jamie is, what is a mistake that you see or that you would warn against? So when people are looking at their marketing or their communication strategies, what are things that you go, look, just don't do this?
Just
What are
don't
some of those
cut your
things?
full marketing budget. like first and foremost. Um, but no, for real, I mean, I'm half joking, but the reality is that is one of the first places that gets
It is.
cut, both from a, advertising spend and sometimes from a staffing perspective. I would say if you need to cut back in that area, do it smart and think about who can stay to maximize the dollars you have left. So for instance, um, your communications team, look at who on your communications team could kind of carry the torch while others are furloughed, perhaps. Who
Right.
can still build content, share it on social media, and make sure that you're staying relevant and top of mind. And those are hard, decisions to
They
make.
are.
But you have to, a little bit take the emotion out of it and say, how do we keep the business moving at the least cost possible? And frankly, PR and communications is usually one of the cheaper ways to do that,
Right.
and can sometimes, have a really, really great impact. And, as things normalize as much as they're going to, I wouldn't suggest, that be your long-term or forever strategy, but I would definitely say don't cut those right now. As you can bring money back in, ramp up digital, do a little bit more and more on digital. But again, be smart about who your audience is and where they are, and capitalize on those segments
Yeah.
more than, trying to do a blanket approach. And then, I hate to say, but probably the more traditional medias are going to be the last ones to come back. And
Right.
it is unfortunate, but I think that's the reality of the situation.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I think unless they have a strong digital media presence, and some of the
Hmm.
radio stations and others do. I
They
mean,
do.
some of even the
That's right.
paper publications, but it just depends on, is that your audience? Are you casting too wide of a net?
Right.
And I'm not suggesting don't quote me on saying don't do it. I'm just saying
Yeah.
look at it.
I know, right?
Look
Be
at it and
careful.
decide. Right. I don't want to get phone calls from friends who are in that segment, but
Right.
it's just being smart. If you have a limited amount of dollars to spend, then you need to cast the nets that are going to bring you the highest level of return that is
That's
going
right.
to actually reach your audience. And the other thing you were mentioning, so I have had, probably 4 or 5 different friends who've reached out and said, I know someone that's working at a company and they just cut the whole marketing department. And there's
Ugh,
one person left and they have all this stuff on their plate
they
and
have
they don't even know
everything.
how they're going to get it done. And
Yeah.
so, some of the things I've suggested is, okay, well then what can they subcontract out?
Yeah.
Sometimes, and I don't think people all the time believe this, but it is true. So let's just say you hire us, or you to come in to do something for a short period of time. One,
Hmm.
it typically costs less because we're not
Right.
eating up benefits, we're
Hmm.
not eating up reimbursement costs and things.
Hmm.
Second, you get to leverage all of the expertise for a fixed
Right.
price or negotiated budget that isn't going to change from whatever's been contracted. And you don't have to keep us around forever, but if it helps
Hmm.
you get over a hump or project into that next phase, and then you're generating dollars to rehire people, sometimes
Right.
it's smarter to use some of those resources that way. And I mean, we've done a lot of work with companies. I mean, that's what I did when I came over to the zoo. I mean, it was filling in a
Mhm.
gap that,
That's
they
right.
needed help with for a short period of time. And then they hired someone in and brought them in, and life continued. But I would say don't be afraid, reach out
That's
to
right.
people that have expertise. Just because they have expertise doesn't mean they're super expensive.
Right.
It
Right.
just, you have to negotiate, and everybody's, I think, willing to work with each other a little bit right now. But it's figuring out how to leverage what you need in a different way. And when you say marketing budgets get cut, I think every marketing job I've ever had, I started the year with a budget, and by the end of the year, I had a fraction left or nothing. Like, we got 6 months
I'm
in,
with
and they're
you.
like, "Oh, we're gonna save money and cut the marketing budget,"
That's
but you
right.
still have to do everything,
Yes.
and so you get really good and resourceful at doing the things that you need to with nothing. And there are a lot of things that you can be doing that are very low cost. But I think the rule of the game is don't stop engaging with your customer base at all costs, because they're the ones who are going to help you pay the bills, generate
Mhm.
revenue, grow your business. So if you go dark, you're not doing yourself any favors. Anyway, in the long run. So
Couldn't agree more.
yeah, I know. We're rooting for all the marketing communications people out there who are getting the news that their budgets are cut in half
I
or
know.
gone. Um,
Oh gosh.
so one more question. Are there any, kind of metrics that you like to track specifically? I mean, I look at engagement. I like to look, one of my favorites is, and I don't know that people don't think about this. Maybe some people do, but I like to see when someone clicks on something. Let's say it's a fake Facebook post that has a link to your website, right? And it goes to whatever page you've sent them to. What
Mhm.
I like to look at next is, where do they spend the most time?
Right.
And typically, most of us don't have the critical content that we want people to know about on the pages that people actually spend the most time on. We have them on the pages that we think it should belong, but
Right.
not necessarily where people spend time. So, are there some of, like, some favorite kind of measurement tools or, metrics that you like to track when you're looking at marketing?
Well, so the reality is across all digital, again, broken record, right? Digital provides the easiest access to all that kind of information. Google Analytics, tons of information. You can see how they got to your site or to your pages of whatever pages they are, right? If you use Facebook, Instagram, you've got all of those digital insights. You can see what are people paying the most attention to, what's getting the most engagement, and then capitalize on those things with the most engagement to learn what to do more of, right? Like take the best of the best and redo that and throw away the stuff that's not creating engagement, even though you might like it, you know?
Right.
Um, and then obviously, if your website is not set up for you to be able to look at it and have those insights that you were describing, being able to see who's on what page, how much time are they spending, and where are they clicking next.
Right.
So basically, through that customer journey, those those are critical things. And if you don't have your website set up that way, it's not terribly hard to do. Some people can do it on their own. It's not very expensive if you need to hire an agency or a contractor to help
Right.
you through that. I know when I was at the zoo, we had a lot of pretty ambitious goals about how we wanted to track the customer journey through the website. And we hired a company to help us, and it was amazing. And the insights were so much more um, telling than what
Yeah.
we thought was happening before, with just being able to see how much time people were spending on a page. Well, sometimes people are spending so much time on a page because they can't find the information they're looking for. That's not necessarily good,
Right.
So
Exactly.
being able to see kind of what that journey was made a really big difference to us and allowed us to kind of capitalize on putting the right information in kind of the right order, I guess, if you will. Because, the other
Yeah.
thing is you don't want people to click around a lot. But I definitely would say if you don't feel like you have that kind of insight into your website or into your analytics, take a Google Analytics class, hire somebody to help you with your website. Do those little things, because once you have the data, again, one of the things again that came out of last night is most CEOs say the social media managers can't justify their spend on social media. Well, that to me seems inexcusable. There's so much data on the back end of social media. Learn how to use it.
Right.
take, again, while things are a little bit slower and just starting to get back to whatever the new normal may be, take the time to take some of those classes to understand the analytics behind your social media and behind your Google and behind your website,
Yeah,
because
and there's
it will make a world of difference.
it will, and it's really not, I mean, I'm not a technical expert by any means when
Me
it comes
either.
to, but you know what? Google Analytics is really easy to set up, and,
That's right.
and if you don't know how, I guarantee you there's a YouTube video or something that Google has on their page that walks you through it. So
Right.
it's just, it's
Or call
taking
one of us. We can help you
or
out.
call one of us, we'll help you. But I can set up Google Analytics, but no, it's important. And the more you know about how your audience is engaging with you, the better you can be
Mhm.
about how it is that you position yourself. So
Definitely.
anyway, so anything else that you want to add before we wrap up? Because I could like continue this conversation for
I
hours.
know. Like, I have more notes, but I hate to bore anybody with all this stuff. No, I just think I really appreciate you kind of taking the time and having me on, and just doing these sessions for people, because I think the more, the more you can take this time to learn and get better at your trade, and we're all going to come out of it better for it, right?
Yeah.
So I appreciate the opportunity to chat about it.
Oh,
How to
thank
keep
you.
us
Well,
sharp.
I'll have to have you back to talk about something else, but no, I'm enjoying doing them, and it's probably something we will just it'll be part of our own social media strategy. But I just think it's important to help people, and whether someone hires us or not, that's not the point of this. The point of this is there's a lot of information, a lot of it can be confusing. You're trying to make good decisions about what to do next. You need to hear from people that are implementing that or that are running up with, running into scenarios to help others. So, yeah, I think it's, the least I can do with the amount of information and experience I've had. And I'm just thrilled that I've been able to, not very, difficult to twist the arms of my colleagues and people I respect in industries to join me. So I appreciate you joining me and
Absolutely.
anyone else
Anytime.
that watches to share some insight on marketing. So thank you, Kristy, for being here. And thank you, everyone, for watching. And we'll see you next week. Bye.